Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I hope you enjoyed the focus on the Saints that Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune gives us the opportunity to do every Friday. Just a terrific reporter and columnist and award-winning. He's on the NFL Hall of Fame selection committee. I mean, this guy is the guy. And as I mentioned, there's a story that he's working on. Can't talk about it because he'll break it at some point next week. But it's fascinating that he has that kind of access, and you'll understand more about that when we talk next Friday about what access we're talking about. Talk about a little bit behind the scenes on how he got the story that he's working on now. It's really, really cool stuff. But it's fun watching the Saints. I think we've got something to look forward to. The betting guys say 7.5 games. I think they're going to do better than that, but we shall see. We shall see. And as Jeff always reminds us, he's going to be the realist at the table. He's not going to get all puffy chest until he sees these guys in action. So, and we're going to get that chance over the next couple of weeks. So anyway, now let's shift gears and move over to, we usually have JT Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News. JT's tied up, and it gives me the opportunity to visit with Caleb Salers, somebody I really enjoy spending time with. So Caleb, how you doing?
I'm well, Ricky. That was a nice way of saying you got stuck with me today.
Oh, no, I didn't get stuck with you. You know that. Hey, listen, the team, I say this every week, but the team at SuperTalk Mississippi News is doing an absolutely incredible job. So their voices and their news coverage goes to 50 radio stations across the state of Mississippi through the SuperTalk News Network. But you can also read their news, whether it be on social media or if you go to supertalk.fm or to the SuperTalk app. And you can see they're capturing the important statewide news, but also the important local news that's happening across the state of Mississippi. It's a small team, but man, do they hit on a bunch of cylinders. And I would really encourage you, if you haven't done it, to download the app or to hot link the supertalk.fm website and see for yourself the stories that this team is capturing on a daily basis. And I came from news media, spent a career in it, and I am very, very impressed with what they are able to do. But it's cool. It's cool being at SuperTalk and knowing that the news that you guys are developing is informing literally every corner of this state. I mean, you guys are hitting on a bunch of cylinders, aren't you?
Yes, Ricky, absolutely. And, it's definitely a challenge because we don't want to give any preferential treatment. We're located here in Jackson in our capital city, but we do have Kelly Bennett on the coast in Gulfport who's doing a fantastic job. And she anchors us through the morning. And then the rest of us, JT, Ben Milam, and myself will, try to anchor us through the afternoon on air. But on our online product never stops. I mean, we're constantly updating you with stories out of Meridian, out of DeSoto County, out of Vicksburg, out of the coast, out of Jackson, and trying to keep you as up to speed, up to date as possible.
Well, I would say, look, for example, when important statewide events occur, and I'll give you the best example from last week, the Neshoba County Fair. I mean, we covered it like a blanket. And really, truthfully, there was some great news coming out of there. But you guys were there and paying attention and capturing these interesting moments that happened during the Neshoba County Fair.
They say you invest blood, sweat, and tears in what you do if you're doing it right. Well, Ben Milam and I invested a lot of sweat into the Neshoba County Fair last week. It was hot, but absolutely, Ricky, we were able to capture a lot of big storylines from the fair, whether it be, our state auditor and lieutenant governor clashing over DEI or, what looks like it's going to be a gubernatorial challenge in 2027 as, Tate Reeves is getting toward the end of not toward the end of his career, but his tenure as governor. But, as we jockey for a new governor in Mississippi, we saw DeKeither Stamps, the Central District Public Service Commissioner of Mississippi, a prominent Democrat in the Jackson area, called for President Joe Biden to step down, saying that would be best for unity nationally and here in local Mississippi. And we had other storylines, a big Supreme Court race where you have a Neshoba County resident, someone who was born and raised there, who kind of got the crowd going and is in the state legislature right now trying to challenge an incumbent Supreme Court justice who's been on the bench for 3 years now. And so, a lot of really neat things, especially in a non-consequential, super big election year. I know we have the big national election taking place in November, but statewide, not really a lot of high-profile races. And so it was good to get, some not just storylines out in Neshoba, but to see people were still having a vested interest in Mississippi politics.
Well, you mentioned Kelly Bennett. I mean, for folks on the coast, they know the name. Anyone who's listened to radio on the coast, you know Kelly Bennett. What a mainstay she is. We're so lucky to have her a part of our team. And then you mentioned Ben Milam as well. You know, and by the way, hot. I've been in the Neshoba County Fair one time, and darn near burned up. You know, and you know what? Here's the thing. Here's the way I talked about it is that if it's part of your heritage, in other words, the Neshoba County experience, having a cabin there and passing it down from one generation to the next, and this big, gigantic family reunion that occurs there. If you have that, if it's part of your DNA, you can sort of withstand the heat. But if you don't have that, it's hard to hang in there with it. You know what I'm saying? But I got to experience, and that's a good thing. You mentioned Ben and you doing what you did. Ben has been from where I'm sitting, he seems like he's fit like a piece of puzzle into this team.
And not only that, so Ricky, a little backstory and a little inside baseball for our listeners. Ben and I went to middle school together. Our families have known each other. We grew up going to Southern Miss football games together. Our families sat with each other. So we have a lot of prior knowledge of one another, and it's helped the camaraderie of the news team. Not only that, it's he's incredibly professional, has the voice of an angel, kind of like Kelly Bennett does, and has done a good job every venture he's had, whether it be play-by-play, at D1 colleges and everywhere else he's been. And he's come here and just hit the ground running. And there's been really, other than like maybe a week, no real big learning curve for him. He kind of came in and just was a professional from day one.
Yeah, Ben Smith, the coach of one of the coaches of baseball at William Carey, when he learned that Ben was joining our team, he was extraordinarily complimentary because he left such a wonderful reputation at William Carey when he moved on to D1. But landing him, you're right. I love his voice. He seems, I haven't met him in person. Obviously, he's been on the show, and I've followed his coverage efforts. He seems to be a good relationship builder. And he seems to be, as we were saying at the beginning, you got with a team like we have and statewide responsibilities, you have to be kind of a jack of all trades. So, he kind of can do it all, and that's great to see. But the Neshoba, as a general rule, is something that SuperTalk kind of owns the coverage coming out of there, because we're reporting not only in words through the website and through the app, but also across the radio stations that I mentioned, the 50 some odd radio stations. But then on top of that, you're part of the programming coming out of there. So it's great to see SuperTalk go there, and it's the center of the media attention that happens at Neshoba, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You have reporters from every network statewide at Neshoba County Fair. And last year, with it being a gubernatorial election, there was a stronger media presence. There were more people. But even this year, with it being a quote unquote lighter year, you still had 2, 3, sometimes even 4 reporters from most every local outlet and the statewide outlets as well. And then you had Ben and I there also.
Yeah, and SuperTalk was the place that most of the major leaders gravitated to, because they knew when they talked to SuperTalk, they're not only talking to the 12 geographically located SuperTalk stations across the state of Mississippi, but the news that emanates from those conversations and whatever they said at the thing goes to 50 radio stations and posted to social media and X and all this. It's a winning strategy for SuperTalk. I'm so proud of SuperTalk for having this ability to make that kind of an impact. And the other thing that JT and I always like to point out is that it's while you may have some programming on SuperTalk that is conservative, the news effort is independent. It's an independent news operation, and they're going to cover it straight up. Because as I said, as a publisher for all of my career, and I continue to say, the thing that's missing today, and we got to have more of it, is providing, as in an unbiased way, in the most objective way possible, the news to citizens so they can choose to decide how they want to lean on this. And we're not going to give it to you in a leaning way. And And I'm proud of SuperTalk for being able to maintain the sort of that independence inside as a news organization. And more recently became a member of the Mississippi Press Association, which I talked with JT about last week. I think that's a great move. I served on that board for many years, and it will be a good relationship for both MPA members and SuperTalk. I think it's going to go both ways, that there can be benefits both ways. And we still don't fully appreciate how that collaboration will work out in terms of the positive things that will come from it. But I think a lot of positive will come from it. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll get into some very specific news that's been covered in Mississippi when we continue our conversation with Caleb Salers from SuperTalk Mississippi News. We'll see you after this on the other side. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day. I'm visiting with my good friend Caleb Salers, who is a part of the news team at SuperTalk Mississippi News. And we kind of every week I'm gonna remind you why it's important to hyperlink to supertalk.fm website on your phone, or to download the SuperTalk Mississippi app, because once you start using the app and seeing the news, you're going to want to come back to it time and time again. That's for sure. And I'll give you a great example. I think we talked a little bit about the Neshoba County Fair, and it was interesting to watch the bit of sparring that took place between Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and the State Auditor Shad White. It was interesting. I foresaw that coming, incidentally, just because of the conversations that we've had on this show. But Frank Bordeaux, who's the past Republican chairman, Frank and I had the opportunity to chat a bunch, and he doesn't look forward to the next cycle. Even though he won't be chairman of the Republican Party, still super active in that effort. And the reason why is because the bench on the Republican side is really strong. Really strong. So all of them are going to be sort of jockeying to figure out, okay, what am I going to run for? And so some of our best and brightest are going to be running against each other. And it won't just be Delbert and Shad running for governor. There'll be one or two or three other names that come out too, and that primary race is going to be really, really brutal. It's going to be, and we're talking about that's 3 years from now. You say, I mean, the governor's barely started his second term, and we're already sparring.
We're 1 year in.
The DEI part of what White is sort of leaning on, it's interesting that Mississippi State recently came out, Sid Salter came out and said, his understanding of how it's being implemented at Mississippi State, he just doesn't have a good understanding of it. I know Mississippi State doesn't want to spar with state leaders. That's not what they want to do. So they're choosing their words carefully. But you're all over that story, aren't you, Caleb?
Ricky, we just published a story on that exact topic last night. Sid Salter was on our program. He was on with Mandy Gunasekara, who was guest hosting for Paul last week at the Neshoba County Fair. And, Sid was basically saying what a lot of the remarks that our state auditor said during his stump speech at the Neshoba County Fair, where he called DEI woke nonsense, said that, the goal of DEI was to villainize whiteness or, to indoctrinate students politically and kind of get them to lean more to the left side of the aisle. Well, Sid Salter said, that's not particularly happening at Mississippi State. And he pointed to President Mark Keenum, who did serve in an important agriculture position in the Trump administration, kind of painting him as he's not this big bleeding heart liberal man. That's not him at all. And said, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is foster an environment for first generation students from different cultures and backgrounds to feel not only safe, but welcomed at Mississippi State and feel like they belong, and then have a place to where we can, propel them to the next phase in life, whether it be in the workforce or whether it be continuing their, higher education, et cetera. And so he said, we're not trying to teach them to lean any way, shape, or form politically or shape their minds that way. We're not trying to indoctrinate anybody. We're just trying to help, marginalized people or students who typically would not go to college, or even student veterans, get the resources they need.
Hey, listen, when I, early in my career, I worked for Knight Ridder for the majority of my career, and we had a very aggressive diversity program. And the goal was to have let's take it specifically to the newsroom, to have the newsroom, the makeup, the demographic makeup of the reporters in the newsroom reflect the community. I mean, that's a really important goal, because we wanted people who were of a community, from a community, to be able to cover the community, so that there was a sense of, we appreciate the diversity that exists in any community. And so, but I think what's happened, though, when you have diversity, equity, and inclusion, the way that it's being used today in the realm of wokeness, we've gotten away from the way I talked about diversity, and we're getting away from this whole notion of meritocracy and people being able to get ahead in life based on merit, et cetera, and it's become such a politically polarizing term. And when the state auditor uses his ability to gather financials from the various universities to understand how much you're paying for it, it's worrisome from the way he's looking at it, and he's looking at it from purely the woke aspect of it, and maybe not appreciating the benefit of diversity conversations that we can be having in our community. It's complicated, and no one's going to win wherever you set. Whatever side of that story you sat on, especially in this presidential election. Incidentally, it doesn't matter how we feel about it in Mississippi, to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to moderates and independents in about maybe 3 states. And that's all the presidential group and hopefuls are talking to currently. What we say and think about it doesn't really matter. In the meantime, we're just going to be polarized and whatever. But it may become an issue. It probably will stay an issue in the governor's race going forward. I predict it probably will. Everything tends to swing too far to one side or too far to the other. My Democratic friends are really deeply concerned about what wokeness is doing, and they wish we could get back to the middle again. But it is interesting that this all kind of emanates, and he tried to put the DEI label on Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, and it's just, again, early in the process, very early in the process, but it's going to be spirited. Don't you agree? Don't you think?
I agree, and I think the state auditor, who actually fired back at Sid Salter's remarks, I want to mention that too, and provided screen grabs from Mississippi State's website of programs he deemed that were irresponsible for taxpayers to cover. And so you could read that story at supertalk.fm. I cover both sides of it fairly and objectively, but looking at what could be a contentious 2027 gubernatorial race, I think the state auditor didn't want to just take a jab. I think he wanted to levy a knockout punch very early in this. But I do agree that it's going to get rather heated down the